My name is Julia Hartley. I had one goal: protect my daughter from the mess her father and I created. But at a summer garden party in Connecticut, I discovered a betrayal so deep it began with my ex-husband and ended with my own father. They weren't just coming for me, they were coming for her. And I wasn't ready. Where are you watching this video from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know how far this story travels. If you'd asked me 5 minutes earlier, I'd have told you I was fine. Really. I was standing on freshly cut grass, sunlight weaving through paper lanterns strung between old maple trees. The kind of afternoon where everything smells like honeysuckle and second chances. I was holding a glass of chilled Prosecco, trying to remember the last time I felt light. The clink of laughter broke through my thoughts, specifically, his laugh. Derek's. I turned my head just enough to see him, still wearing that nauseating navy blazer he'd used to charm my mother years ago. Except now he was using it to charm a stranger. She was younger, too young, and leaning into him like he had all the answers. I could feel it, that old burn rising up my spine, but I wasn't going to ruin the party, not this time. "Mom!" It hit like thunder. My daughter, Lily, tore across the lawn barefoot, her pink sundress billowing behind her like a flag of panic. "Mom, we have to go right now." Her eyes were wide, frantic. Her hands trembled as they gripped mine. I crouched, instinct overriding everything. "What happened?" She shook her head, but her lower lip quivered like it always did when she was trying not to cry in public. "Please, I just want to leave." I stood and scanned the party. Derek saw us. And for a split second, something flashed across his face. Recognition, guilt, then just as quickly, that polished mask slid back on. "Julia!" he called with a mock-surprised smile, the woman beside him still clutching his arm. "Everything okay?" Everything okay? I wanted to walk over and shatter that mask, ask him what he'd done to make our daughter look like she'd seen a ghost. Instead, I gathered Lily in my arms, her breath hot and erratic against my neck. "Thank you for inviting us," I said to no one in particular. Then to Lily, quietly, "We're leaving." We slipped past the guests who barely noticed the storm passing through their perfect afternoon. My heels sank slightly into the grass with each step, like the earth itself was trying to slow me down. In the car, Lily buckled herself in without a word. I shut my door, started the engine, and glanced in the rearview mirror. She was wiping her cheeks with the hem of her dress. I reached back instinctively, but she whispered, "Don't, please." The ache in my chest twisted. As we pulled away, I glanced back once more. Derek stood at the edge of the yard, sipping from a glass and watching our car retreat with all the emotion of a man watching a delivery truck drive away. I didn't know what had happened yet, but I knew one thing: something had shifted. And whatever Derek had set in motion, it was already coming for us. The silence in the car was thick. Not awkward, not empty, dense. It wrapped around us like fog, stifling, pressing. I kept my hands at 10 and 2, eyes locked on the road, even as my mind screamed to pull over and demand answers. But I knew my daughter. Lily needed space. She always had. We drove past rows of white-fenced yards and pumpkin-colored shutters, the kind of picture-perfect suburbia that made you forget how quickly things could unravel. The kind of place where betrayal didn't look like a storm. It looked like a quiet conversation in a manicured backyard. After a few miles, her voice broke through, small and threadbare. I heard them talking. I didn't say anything, just kept driving. My hands were shaking too much to offer comfort. Dad and Grandpa Martin in the sunroom. I went inside to get my sketchbook and they didn't see me. I turned off the radio, though it had only been a whisper of jazz. The kind Derek used to say made everything feel expensive. They were talking about me. The words slammed into me. She was staring out the window, lashes still wet, one hand fidgeting with the friendship bracelet Monica had made for her last summer. She hadn't worn it in weeks. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," she said quickly, like it mattered, like that was the part she might get in trouble for. "I was just there. And I heard Grandpa say he said he'd talked to a friend who knew a judge and that you'd crack under pressure." My throat went dry. "And Dad said, perfect, she's emotional, it won't take much." My daughter's voice trembled, not with fear, but humiliation, as if repeating their words made her feel complicit. Then came the part that stole my breath. "Dad said if we file next month, we can use the new job offer against her. that it makes her unstable. And Grandpa said something like, "It'll be easier if she feels cornered. Maybe we offer her a deal, buy her out." Buy me out. As if I were some part of the house they could sell off for convenience. Lily turned to me then, her voice cracking. "He said I'd live with Dad, forever." I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. "Did they see you?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "I hid behind the sofa until they left. I thought maybe I heard wrong. But when I saw Dad laughing with that woman," her voice dropped to a whisper, "I just knew." I nodded once, just to let her know I'd heard. The quiet returned, but this time it hummed with meaning. "I don't want to live with him," she whispered. "I don't want to leave you." Tears blurred the road. I blinked hard, fast. I couldn't fall apart, not yet. "I won't let them take you," I said. It wasn't a promise. It was a war cry whispered through clenched teeth. But inside, I was spiraling. Martin, my father, had always been distant, sure, cold even, but this was orchestrated, legal, strategic. They weren't just trying to hurt me, they were trying to erase me. I pulled into our driveway, the peeling white shutters catching the late afternoon sun. The house looked small and tired, but it was ours. Everything I had fought for since the divorce lived within those walls. I parked, turned to her, and brushed the hair from her cheek. "I believe you," I said, "and I'm going to fix this." She nodded, lower lip trembling. "I love you, Lily." "I love you too, Mom." We didn't hug. We just sat in the car until the shadows grew long across the lawn, each of us lost in our thoughts. Inside, I would break. But not here, not in front of her. They think I'll crack. Let them try. Lily went straight to her room without needing to be told. I could hear the soft shuffle of her sneakers hitting the floor, the click of her door closing, and the gentle thump of her body collapsing into bed. She didn't even ask for dinner. I stood in the hallway for a long time after that. Our house smelled like laundry detergent and lemon floor cleaner, but tonight it all felt foreign, like I'd wandered into a life that used to be mine but wasn't anymore. I peeled off my shoes by the door and moved in slow, robotic steps toward the bathroom. Once inside, I locked the door behind me. I stared at the mirror, the kind of look that's too long, too honest. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting pale shadows across my face. I looked older. Not in the usual tired mom way, but hollowed. Like someone had taken a chisel to my insides. There was a single drop of mascara smudged under one eye. I didn't wipe it off. Outside, the rain started. It came fast and hard, tapping the window in a frantic rhythm that matched the pulse in my neck. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, suburban thunder, muted by tidy neighborhoods and trimmed hedges. Still, it echoed. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and let my body fold in. No tears came. Not yet. Instead, memories rose up like steam. Derek's voice, laughing on our honeymoon when I slipped on the boat deck and he caught me just in time. "I'll always catch you," he'd said, and for a while I believed him. The night he came home late from client drinks with a smear of lipstick on his collar and it wasn't mine. The excuses, the gaslighting, the way he spun the narrative so tightly I started doubting my own eyes. "I'm not cheating, Julia. You're just paranoid. You need help." Then there was the mediation meeting, where he smiled across the table like we were negotiating a car lease and not the end of a life together. And my father, Martin, sitting across from me with folded arms when I begged him to testify on my behalf. "It's not my place to interfere," he'd said, but apparently conspiring to take my daughter away was his place. I stood abruptly, hands trembling. My vision blurred, not from tears but from fury. I leaned over the sink, gripping the edge like it was the only thing tethering me to the floor. They were going to paint me as unstable, emotional, volatile. They didn't need to lie. All they had to do was wait for me to break. And the worst part, I could feel the cracks forming. I exhaled hard. "Not again." The words escaped before I could stop them. Not again, not this time. I flicked off the bathroom light and opened the cabinet. My eyes scanned the shelves, cold medicine, half-used lotion, expired toothpaste. Then behind an old box of tampons, I found it. A small notebook, the one I'd tucked away last year after therapy stopped being affordable. I flipped it open and stared at the first page. "You survived before, you will again." The writing was shaky. I remembered scribbling it on a night like this, rain outside, pain inside, after the divorce finalized. after the bank threatened foreclosure, after I made Lily pancakes for dinner because it was all I had left in the pantry. I tore out the page and stuck it to the mirror with a piece of tape. Then I opened a new one, and I started writing every fact, every quote Lily shared, every emotion, every threat. I wrote it all down because I needed proof, not for the courts, not yet, but for me, to remind myself this was real, that I wasn't imagining it, that I wasn't overreacting. Because that's how it always starts, when people like Derek and Martin try to make women like me believe we're just too much, too angry, too emotional, too reactive, too loud. I wasn't too anything, I was a mother, and I was done playing defense. Outside, the rain pounded harder like it agreed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to the storm retreat, the silence afterward louder than the rain. My mind wouldn't stop replaying Lily's voice, brittle and scared. He said I'd live with Dad forever. The phrase kept folding into itself like a curse. By sunrise, I had made my decision. I had to talk to Martin, not as a daughter begging for support, but as a mother demanding answers. I drove to my parents' house mid-morning, ignoring the knot in my stomach. The gravel crunching under my tires sounded like bones snapping. Their colonial home stood tall and clean and silent, like always. Nothing ever looked out of place here, but everything was. My mother's car wasn't in the driveway, just Martin's silver sedan parked precisely within the lines. Of course it was. He answered the door like I'd just dropped by for coffee. No surprise, no guilt, just that neutral expression he always wore, like a man mildly inconvenienced. "Julia," he said, stepping aside without a smile. "Your mother's at her book club." I stepped into the foyer. The air smelled like lemon wood polish and old silence. "This isn't about Mom." He led me into the kitchen. The chairs hadn't moved since the last time I visited months ago, before our interactions shrunk to birthday calls and clipped holiday pleasantries. Martin poured himself coffee but didn't offer me any. That told me everything. "I know," I said flatly. He glanced up. "Know what?" "About you and Derek, about the custody plan, about the deal." "Lily heard you." His jaw didn't twitch, not even slightly. He just set the mug down and folded his hands. "So she told you." There it was, not denial, just quiet confirmation, like he was acknowledging a weather report. I stared at him. "How could you?" He shrugged once, like it wasn't personal, just unfortunate. "It's not about you, Julia, it's about stability." "She's my child," I snapped. "Not a property share, not a favor you pass around between men." Martin's expression hardened just a hair, like a pane of frosted glass fogging at the edges. "She deserves consistency, structure. Derek can provide that." "And I can't." He met my eyes then, finally. "You're emotional, you've been volatile since the divorce, you've changed." I stepped back as if slapped. "You mean I stopped letting you make decisions for me?" I said, my voice rising. "You mean I started living on my own terms?" He didn't respond. That was his trick, strategic silence. The kind that made you question your own rage. "You know how hard I've fought to hold it together for Lily," I continued, each word sharper than the last. "And you're undermining me, behind my back, with the man who cheated on me, lied to me, gaslit me." Martin picked up his coffee, took a slow sip. "Derek has made mistakes, but he's stable now. He's manipulative. You're being dramatic." That did it. Something in me snapped, not in a chaotic, messy way, but in the clean, final way that a cord does when it's frayed to its last fiber. I stood up from the table slowly. "She's not a project, Martin," I said, my voice cold and clear. "She's not a spreadsheet or a deal to broker, and she's not yours to hand off. You're making this harder than it has to be." "No, you are." He looked up again, annoyed now. "Julia, no," I cut him off. "You don't get to Julia me right now." The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the air tighter. "For years I kept waiting for you to show up, to protect me, to stand up when Derek tore our marriage apart, and you never did, you just watched." He opened his mouth, but I wasn't done. "And now you're trying to erase me as a mother, and the worst part, you actually think you're helping." Martin's face remained unreadable, but I saw it then, a flicker, the smallest ripple of doubt, or maybe fear. "I won't let you do this," I said finally. "I won't let either of you take her from me." I turned toward the door. "You don't want a legal battle," he called behind me. I paused, just enough to throw the last blade over my shoulder. "Then you should have thought twice before declaring one." I left without another word. As I pulled away, the image of him standing in the kitchen, mug in hand, unmoved and surrounded by stainless steel stillness, it burned itself into my mind. But so did the sound of my own voice. Clear, unapologetic, louder than his silence ever was. It came in the mail. No doorbell, no warning, just a plain white envelope with my name typed in bold, sterile letters. No return address. I knew what it was the moment I saw it. My hand hovered over the stack of mail on the porch table, unwilling to touch it, as if not opening it would delay the inevitable. Lily was upstairs in her room, humming along to music with the door cracked open. She had no idea what was about to unfold, and I wasn't ready to tell her. I closed the front door gently behind me and walked to the kitchen. Set the envelope on the counter, stared at it like it might catch fire. Then I opened it. Summons, petition for change of custody, filed by Derek Bennett. The words blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again. I scanned the pages with numb fingers, claims of emotional instability, financial unreliability, references to a tense home environment. A note about concerns raised by family members, undoubtedly Martin's polite betrayal dressed in legalese, and a court date, 4 weeks away, just 4. I sat down at the kitchen table, my body going cold like something inside me had slipped underwater. They were serious. They weren't bluffing, and I was running out of time. I reached for my phone with shaky hands and began scrolling through contacts, names I hadn't touched in years. Friends of friends, former colleagues, neighbors who once knew a lawyer or said, "If you ever need anything." I called 7 people that day. 6 said some version of, "I wish I could help, but..." One didn't answer at all. By 6 p.m., my kitchen table was buried in notes and yellowed legal pamphlets, unpaid bills, coffee cups with lipstick rings, and an untouched frozen dinner thawing beneath paperwork. My laptop screen showed nothing but a blinking cursor in an empty email to a law office that hadn't replied to my earlier plea for a consultation. A wave of despair crept up behind me, slow and cruel. It wasn't just the case. It was the isolation. The silence after anger, when the world moves on but your life stays paused. It was the realization that when you really need help, even people who love, you don't always pick up the phone. I opened my front window for air. The neighborhood looked exactly the same, kids biking, someone mowing a lawn, porch lights flickering on like fireflies. None of them knew what I was about to lose. I dropped my head into my hands, pressing the heels of my palms into my eyes until I saw stars. I needed someone, anyone. And that's when Monica called. Monica wasn't family. She wasn't even a close friend. But she was real. We met last year when I spilled coffee on her vintage tote bag at the co-op market, and she responded with a wink and, "It's an upgrade, honestly." Since then, she'd become something like a second cousin you actually wanted around, candid, irreverent, and always 2 seconds from either cursing or crying in solidarity. "Hey," she said as soon as I answered. "I saw your missed call. What's going on?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, my throat locked. "You breathing?" she asked gently. "Barely." "I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, she was sitting at my table, reading the summons like it was an insult someone had shouted across a crowded room. "What a load of crap," she muttered. "Unstable. You're literally the most overprepared mom I've ever met. You once brought your own soap to the school field trip." I almost smiled. "I can't find a lawyer," I whispered. "No one's calling back, and the ones who do say they can't take a case like this in such short time without a retainer." Monica's face softened. "How much?" "Too much." She stood and paced like a lion in a bookstore. "Okay, let's think. We'll start a GoFundMe, or sell Derek's fancy watch collection on Craigslist, or..." "I'm not crowdfunding my motherhood," I said quietly. This isn't just about money." I didn't want pity. I wanted power. I wanted someone to believe me. But belief doesn't pay court fees. It doesn't make judges listen. It doesn't undo the precision of Derek's timing or Martin's credibility or the fact that I looked on paper exactly how they wanted me to look, overwhelmed, alone, defeated. Monica sat again, her hand landing on mine with a firmness that jolted me. "You lost a battle, Jules," she said. "Not the war." I stared at her, my vision swimming again. "What war?" I asked. "The one where they underestimated the wrong woman." The courthouse smelled like paper and old tension. Like everything inside had been sweating secrets for years. I stood at the security checkpoint, arms raised, palms open, trying to pretend this was just another building. Just another room, just another day. It wasn't. Inside, the walls were beige, but the judgment was already thick in the air. I kept my coat wrapped tight, even though it wasn't cold. It felt like armor. A second skin against the sharp looks and sharper lies waiting ahead. I clutched my folder, thin, trembling, filled with the few notes and documents I'd been able to gather. I had no lawyer. Just Monica's voice in my head on repeat. You lost a battle, not the war. You're still in the fight. But I didn't feel like a fighter. I felt like prey. When I turned the corner toward courtroom 3C, I saw him. Derek, perfectly pressed. Clean cut. Navy suit tailored within an inch of its life. His blonde hair combed back like a campaign ad. He leaned in close to a woman in sharp heels and even sharper lipstick, his attorney. They both laughed at something. The sound was low and smug, like they already knew the outcome. He looked up, saw me, and smirked. That smirk, God, I remembered it. The one he wore when he knew he'd broken something I couldn't fix. I walked past him without speaking, though every part of me burned. I felt the heat crawl up my spine as his lawyer turned to whisper something else. Probably. This will be easy. The bailiff called my name. Julia Hartley, I nodded. All rise, someone said. The judge entered. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at either of us, really, just his notes, which Derek's attorney had already flooded with glossy documentation and testimonials. I could see the neat tabbed sections across the desk: stability, employment, school records, mental fitness. They weren't building a case. They were building a story, and I was the villain. Mr. Bennett is requesting a full custody modification, the judge began, his voice clipped. Based on concerns regarding the mother's financial reliability, emotional stability, and capacity to provide consistent care. I stood when prompted. My knees nearly buckled, but I stood. Do you have representation today, Miss Hartley? No, Your Honor. He sighed, actually sighed, like my lack of counsel was an inconvenience. To him. Derek's lawyer launched into her argument with the smoothness of someone who'd done this 100 times and probably never lost. She painted a picture of a struggling mother overwhelmed by stress, unable to hold down employment, creating a disrupted environment for the child. She's late to school events, has missed medical appointments, was recently denied for a housing loan. Mr. Bennett, by contrast, offers structure, stability, and an extended support system. I wanted to shout that I was the one who held Lily through every fever, that I was the one who gave up vacations, late nights, every piece of my career just to be there. But the judge didn't want warmth. He wanted order, paper, proof, and I didn't have enough of either. When it was my turn to speak, my voice cracked on the first sentence. I tried again. Your Honor, I know I don't have legal representation, but I do have my daughter's best interest. And Ms. Hartley, the judge cut in, I would encourage you to keep statements brief and specific. This is not the time for emotional testimony. But what else did I have? I stumbled through the rest. Citing Lily's routines, the drawings she left taped to our fridge, the way she still asked me to braid her hair on school days. I said her name like a prayer. Like that alone might tip the scale. It didn't. By the end of the hearing, my hands were slick with sweat, my heart pounding like I'd sprinted a marathon with no finish line. The judge glanced at his notes, then back at Derek. We'll reconvene with a final ruling next session, but given the strength of petitioner's documentation and the absence of legal counsel for the respondent, temporary custody is granted to Mr. Bennett until final review. The words hit harder than I expected. Temporary. As if she were furniture on loan. I didn't cry, not yet, I just nodded numbly. Derek didn't look at me. He just shook his lawyer's hand, already turning toward the door like he'd been handed a receipt, not a child. The next morning, I couldn't get out of bed. My body didn't feel like mine. It was heavy, unfamiliar, as if someone had swapped it with a mannequin and forgotten to leave the instructions. The sunlight slipped through the blinds in quiet accusation. You lost her, it whispered. Lily was gone. Derek picked her up right after the hearing. She didn't even get to come home, just a court-approved nod and a pat on the back for transition success. I didn't get a goodbye. I didn't get to pack her favorite socks or the stuffed raccoon she couldn't sleep without. I didn't get a say. That night I lay on her bed, curled around a t-shirt she'd left on the floor. It smelled like shampoo and pencil erasers. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. Because the knock on the door nearly sent me off the couch. It was Monica, again. She walked in carrying a cardboard tray with 2 coffees and a paper bag that smelled like muffins and mercy. "I figured you hadn't eaten," she said, eyeing the cluttered apartment. "And I figured you hadn't showered, and I figured you hadn't spoken to a single human being since the hearing." She wasn't wrong. I sank into a chair and took the coffee, hands trembling. "She's gone," I said quietly. "I know." "No, Monica. She's really gone, and I let it happen." "You didn't let anything happen," she said, unwrapping a muffin like she was defusing a bomb. "They ambushed you. They ganged up with power and money and lies. You didn't lose custody. You were robbed." I stared at her hollow. "But everyone believes them. The court believed them. My own father is a spineless politician in a sweater vest," she snapped. "You don't need his approval. You need a damn plan." I laughed. It surprised both of us. "Did you just call my father spineless?" Monica grinned. "I've been holding that one for weeks." The grin faded fast, though. "Jules, listen, I know you feel like you've hit bottom, and maybe you have, but I promise you you're not buried, you're planted, and we're going to grow something from this." "How?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She stood, pacing now. "We're going to start small. We get your job situation stable." I talked to my friend Nora, who just hired part-time staff for night cleaning shifts at the downtown offices. "It's not glamorous, but it's money. Then we clean up this place. You get sleep. You eat food. You document everything." Everything. Every missed call, every drop-off that's late, every time Lily mentions something off, you build your case quietly like a woman lighting matches in the dark. I stared at her, stunned. "You really thought about this?" "I never stopped thinking about it." She paused, then added, "Also, I may have posted a blog about what happened, just a short piece, no names, just a story, yours." My chest tightened. "Monica, it's already up," she said quickly. "And it's already blowing up. People are furious. Dozens of moms are commenting with similar stories. One woman offered you her lawyer's info." I opened my mouth, closed it, then finally said, "You posted my story without asking." She winced. "I did, and maybe I shouldn't have. But Julia, people see you now." I didn't know what to feel, gratitude or fear, maybe both. But one thing was clear, I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to strangers, not to Monica. And maybe, just maybe, not to the people who could help. I knew something was wrong the moment my phone started buzzing before sunrise. 4 missed calls, 2 unknown numbers, a voicemail from Derek. I hadn't heard his voice in days, and suddenly there it was, laced with fury, tightly controlled like a rope pulled too tight. "What the hell are you doing, Julia? Take it down. I swear if you cost me my job or disrupt Lily's routine again, I'll file to cut visitation completely. This is defamation. It ends now." He hung up before I could even hear the end. I stared at the phone, numb. Visitation. He was threatening to take everything. I opened the blog post. There it was, Monica's voice in every word, raw and defiant. She hadn't named names, but the story was unmistakable. The overwhelmed mother, the custody ambush, the cold betrayal by someone inside her own family. She had painted me as a survivor, a fighter. The comment section was a storm. "Going through something so similar. This is why family courts need reform. My sister lost her kids to her ex who had a better lawyer. This is real." And buried between the outrage and empathy, a quiet one-line comment that sent a chill through me. "Derek Bennett is my brother-in-law. This sounds awfully familiar." I wasn't sure whether to feel seen or exposed. I called Monica. "Hey, you okay?" she answered, her voice groggy. "You posted it without asking." A pause. "I know, I'm sorry. I really thought it might help. Derek's threatening to cut off visitation." Another pause, this time silence. "I'll take it down," she said quietly. "Right now." There was no fight in her voice, just guilt. "I know you meant well," I said, my anger bleeding into exhaustion. "But I can't afford another battle I didn't choose." We hung up in a weird stillness, and for the first time since this began, I felt the weight of being truly alone in the fight again. That afternoon, I sat across from Lily at a supervised visitation center, bright walls, cheap toys, a clock ticking louder than the laughter around us. She looked smaller somehow, quieter. She picked at the edge of her sleeve, avoiding eye contact. Daddy said people are lying about him on the internet. My throat tightened. What else did he say? She shrugged. That you're mad and confused, that you're making stuff up to win. There it was. He was using the post to poison her mind. I leaned in gently. Lily, you know me, I'd never lie to hurt you or anyone. She nodded, but it was slow, hesitant, like she wasn't sure which story to believe. I wanted to scream. Not at her, but at the court, the world, the man who had once promised to always keep our family whole. Instead, I held her hand and whispered, You're the only thing that matters. Everything I do is for you. She didn't say anything, but she squeezed my fingers. When the visit ended, I sat in the car for a long time, phone dark in my lap. I thought of Monica, of her good intentions, of the backlash that was already building. One story, one true story, was enough to set everything on fire. But now I was the one holding the match. I deleted the post, or tried to. It had already been reposted dozens of times, copied, reshared, reframed, like a rumor with roots. I texted Monica a simple apology. No blame, no bitterness. Just, I know you meant well, but it's too dangerous now. I need space. She didn't reply right away. When she did, it was a single message, understood. But if you ever need me again, I'm here. No posting, no noise, just me. And for the first time, I cried, not because of what I'd lost, but because even in all this wreckage, someone still stood at the edge of it, waiting. It showed up like a whisper in the storm. An email buried between bills and court reminders with a subject line that didn't scream, it listened. Your case deserves review. At first, I thought it was spam, another phishing scam disguised as kindness. But something about the sender name stopped me, Civic Alliance for Family Justice. There was no exclamation mark, no promise of fast wins or cash settlements, just a quiet confidence. A sharp edge wrapped in courtesy. I clicked it. The body of the email was short, professional. 3 paragraphs that somehow felt more sincere than anything I'd heard in court. Ms. Hartley, we've become aware of your situation through recent online discussions and have reason to believe your custody case may involve judicial misconduct and conflicts of interest. We specialize in pro bono legal advocacy for high-risk custody disputes where systemic bias has played a role. If you're open to a consultation, our legal team would like to meet with you. No obligation, no publicity, just truth. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Was this real? And more importantly, could I trust it? I forwarded it to Monica, even though we hadn't spoken since I'd asked for space. Her reply came 6 minutes later. It's legit. They helped my friend's sister last year. They don't mess around, meet with them. I read the email again. Just truth. God, I wanted truth. Not spun through court briefs or filtered through someone else's lawyer, but truth that stood on its own legs. Truth that could fight back. 3 days later, I was sitting in a high-rise office in Midtown Manhattan. The kind of place where the walls didn't just have art, they had intent. The receptionist offered me sparkling water. I said no. My hands were already sweating. They led me to a glass-walled conference room with views of the skyline. It felt like I was on another planet. One where power didn't apologize, and then they walked in. 3 attorneys. 2 women, 1 man, all sharp suits, sharp eyes, and sharper silence as they reviewed my file. They didn't smile like court-appointed counselors. They didn't offer tissues. They offered facts. We've reviewed the court records, said the lead attorney, a woman named Marin. And what's happening to you isn't just unfair, it's unethical. My breath caught. She slid a printed packet across the table. In the past 18 months, the judge assigned to your case has ruled in favor of parties represented by Derek Bennett's attorney in 6 out of 6 similar petitions. That's a pattern. And patterns like that invite scrutiny. My heart was pounding. You're saying the judge and Derek's lawyer? We're saying their relationship goes deeper than the courtroom. Shared campaign fundraisers, board memberships, social affiliations. I stared at the packet. Proof. Not just emotion. Not just instinct. Evidence. What happens now? If you allow us to represent you, we'll file a motion to reopen the case. We'll present our findings to the State Oversight Committee, and we'll pursue public interest pressure. Media, Marin nodded. Selective, strategic, and only with your approval. I sank back into the chair, the weight of everything catching up to me. And if it doesn't work? Her expression didn't change. Then we keep going. This case isn't just about your daughter. It's about how many times this exact playbook has been used against women without resources or connections. We've seen it before. We fight it every day. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just nodded. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, someone believed me and had the power to do something about it. And that changed everything. You could feel it in the air. The energy in that courtroom wasn't cold this time, it was charged. Like static waiting to ignite. Camera crews waited outside. Legal reporters clutched notebooks in the hallway. The Civic Alliance had leaked their findings strategically. A few pages here, a discreet interview there. Just enough to raise eyebrows, enough to shift the narrative. Now everyone was watching. Derek walked in wearing the same tailored suit, but this time he wasn't smiling. His lawyer's handshake was stiff. Their whispered conversation wasn't confident, it was urgent. I sat down quietly beside Marin, who gave me a single nod. It was enough. The judge today wasn't the same man who granted Derek temporary custody. That man was now the subject of a formal ethics investigation, and from what I heard, suddenly on extended leave. This judge, Judge Leone, was sharp-eyed and brisk, neutral but not cold. She opened the hearing without theatrics. This session is in response to a motion filed by the Civic Alliance for Family Justice, citing conflict of interest and procedural misconduct in the custody case of Julia Hartley versus Derek Bennett. The words landed heavy. Derek shifted in his chair. His lawyer cleared her throat and tried to speak first. Your Honor, we contest the relevance of these allegations. The prior judge's rulings were well within judicial discretion. Judge Leone held up a hand. We'll get to that. Then she turned to Marin. Proceed. What followed was the most surreal 40 minutes of my life. Marin didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She revealed. Page by page, she laid out the connections, donations from Derek's law firm to the judge's campaign fund, their co-hosted events, the lopsided ruling record, the unexplained speed with which my custody hearing had been expedited while others waited months. The courtroom murmured more than once. I heard one reporter scribbling so fast her pen squeaked. Derek's lawyer tried to push back, but every objection was swatted down with calm clarity. And then it happened. The judge asked me to speak. I stood, heart thudding. My palms damp, but I wasn't shaking. Your Honor, I said, I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because the system that was supposed to protect my daughter failed her and me. I was called emotional, unstable, unprepared. But the only thing I was guilty of was not having the right connections. I paused. Let it breathe. I'm not the only woman this has happened to, but I want to be the last. When I sat down, the room was silent. Even Derek didn't look at me. His hands were clenched together like he was praying or panicking. Judge Leone reviewed her notes. Then she spoke, steady and crisp. In light of this new evidence, temporary custody is hereby revoked from Mr. Bennett. An independent review of the initial proceedings will be conducted, and full interim custody will be returned to Ms. Hartley pending final outcome. I didn't move, not at first. The words took a second to land. Then Marin touched my hand. You won, Julia, you just won. Derek stood up too fast. This is outrageous, he barked. You're letting media manipulation override real parenting decisions. But Judge Leone didn't flinch. You played games with justice, Mr. Bennett, she said flatly. And justice doesn't play back. The gavel struck once. Final, loud, like thunder after a long, dry silence. I walked out of that courtroom to flashbulbs and questions and microphones I didn't answer, because there was only one voice I wanted to hear. Mom! Lily's arms wrapped around me like she was trying to hold me together. I held her tighter. We're really going home, she whispered. I smiled through tears. Yes, baby, we are. They say justice is blind, but today it was watching. The courthouse was packed, standing room only. Reporters lined the back wall. Activists from family rights groups sat shoulder to shoulder in the benches. Even Monica was there, though she stayed out of sight until it was over. She didn't want to take attention from what this moment truly was, a reckoning. Derek sat beside a new lawyer this time. Older, quieter. The kind you hire when the game's no longer about winning but survival. His posture was different now. No confident lean. No smirking charm. Just a man boxed in by the very walls he helped build. The original judge, Judge Caro, wasn't there, but his name echoed through the courtroom like a ghost. The investigation had uncovered more than we thought. Dozens of custody decisions, a trail of financial favors, emails that should have never been sent. And now, formal disciplinary hearings were underway. Disbarment wasn't just possible, it was probable. Judge Leone returned to the bench with the same calm she'd brought weeks earlier. But this time, she held no clipboard, just a single folder. She opened it slowly. "After extensive review," she began, "this court finds that the custody proceedings involving Ms. Julia Hartley were compromised by undisclosed relationships between legal counsel and the presiding judge." She turned her gaze toward Derek, measured, unwavering. The petitioner, Mr. Derek Bennett, knowingly benefited from these conflicts. Furthermore, recent evidence of coercive behavior, including threats to restrict visitation without legal basis, demonstrates a pattern of manipulation. My chest tightened. I reached down and squeezed Lily's hand where she sat beside me, her back straight and her eyes wide. "Effective immediately," Judge Leone continued. "Full custody is awarded to Ms. Hartley. Mr. Bennett's visitation rights will be suspended pending evaluation by a court-appointed child psychologist. Additionally, all prior rulings by Judge Caro involving this legal firm will be reopened for ethical review." She paused, then looked at me. "Ms. Hartley, on behalf of this court and the people it serves, I offer you something rarely heard in these halls." She set the folder down. "An apology." The room was silent, not out of shock but reverence, because something sacred had happened. Not just to me, but to truth. When the gavel struck, I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I simply exhaled. Like I'd been holding my breath for a year. Derek stood, his face blank. For the first time, he looked small, not angry, not powerful. Just ordinary, like the mask had finally fallen off. He didn't say a word as he walked out. No apology, no explanation, just silence. The kind that comes when everything you built on lies collapses. Outside, the air felt brighter somehow. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted my name, but I wasn't listening. Because Lily was holding my hand tighter than ever and whispering, "Can we get pancakes?" I laughed. "Absolutely." We walked to the corner diner where we used to go before everything fell apart. She ordered chocolate chip with whipped cream. I didn't stop her. We sat by the window watching traffic roll by like life itself was in motion again. "You okay, Mom?" she asked around a bite. I smiled at her. For the first time in a long time, I really think I am. 1 year later, I stood under the yellow pendant lights of the town library's community room, holding a journal that nearly never got written. The chairs were mismatched, the microphones a little too tinny, but the room was full, and not just of people. It was full of quiet power, women with folded arms and heavy bags beneath their eyes. Young mothers rocking toddlers, 2 grandmothers holding hands, a man in a faded blue hoodie with a notepad resting on his knee, and Monica, standing near the back in a bright scarf and sneakers with rainbow laces, arms crossed, eyes glassy. And in the front row, Lily, my daughter, my anchor, my mirror. Her legs swung slightly beneath the folding chair, and she gave me a tiny thumbs up that only I could see. I hadn't planned to speak tonight. I was just supposed to read a chapter from my journal, just a short passage about recovery and renewal. But as I stood at the podium, paper in hand, something inside me shifted. I looked out at the room, cleared my throat, and said instead, "My name is Julia Hartley. Some of you know my story already. Some of you are living it." Heads nodded. Some tears had already started. 1 year ago, I walked into a courtroom and was told I wasn't fit to be a mother. Not because I hurt my child or abandoned her or neglected her, but because I didn't have what the other side had: money, connections, and silence. I glanced at Lily. She was listening, really listening. "I used to think silence was safety," I continued. "But it's not. Silence is a luxury for people who don't have to prove they matter." I paused, letting that land. The people who tried to take my daughter didn't just want custody, they wanted control. Of my story, my image, my voice. But they didn't get it, because someone actually, a lot of someone's stood up. Monica, whose back they're pretending she's not crying. The Civic Alliance lawyers who didn't care about my bank account. And strangers online who reminded me I wasn't crazy. A ripple of laughter. But most of all, my daughter, who, even when she was scared and confused, still trusted me to fight for her. I opened the journal, after the rain, and read. I thought being a mother meant protecting her from everything, but sometimes it means teaching her how to survive in a world that tries to tell her she doesn't belong in her own story. When I closed the journal, the room was silent, not the awkward kind. The kind where hearts are full and words are still landing. I don't need applause, I said. I need you to tell your story next. And then they did applaud, not politely, but like they meant it. Afterward, people lined up to speak with me. They told me about custody hearings, restraining orders, silent dinners with disapproving in-laws, about not being believed, about fighting alone. But none of them were alone anymore. I felt that. Outside, the air had that early spring bite, still crisp, but with the faintest promise of warmth. Lily held my hand as we walked to the car. You talked different tonight, she said. Different how? Like you weren't scared. I smiled, brushing a loose curl from her cheek. I'm not, I said. Not anymore. We stopped at the corner diner on the way home, our old spot. The waitress remembered us. She even remembered Lily's usual chocolate chip pancakes with too much whipped cream. You two celebrating something? She asked. Just life, I said. When we got home, the apartment was warm and filled with the quiet sounds of peace. A kettle warming, music humming low from the hallway speaker, the smell of lavender from the candle on the windowsill. On the counter sat a package I hadn't seen before, from the Civic Alliance. Inside was a bound copy of the legal brief they'd used to reopen my case, signed on the first page by every attorney who'd touched it. Underneath, a handwritten note, "Thank you for fighting loud enough that others found their courage." Later that night, I sat down with a fresh journal. Clean pages, no title yet, just one sentence at the top. You survived, now teach them how.